Yeah,
Please find a seat.
Yeah, come sit on the mountain and we'll do you good.
Can I ask you folks either to push in, or I'm gonna let this woman take that seat, or there's one over there. Alright, we all like each other, so we're gonna get nice and cozy. Alright, thank you so much for being here. My name is Reagan, I'm your event host tonight. We are the Goldrich Bookstore. If this is your first time here, welcome, thank you so much. If this is not your first time here, thanks for coming back. We host over 150 events a year for local authors mainly, but also authors around the nation. And we're able to do that because of folks like you who come out and support both your independent bookstore and your local authors. So we appreciate you being here. I'm just gonna go over a couple of housekeeping things really quick. There is a restroom behind the desk where you checked in, so you're welcome to use that at any time. When you checked in, you received a $5 off red coupon. Make sure you hold on to that. You'll use that at the front registers downstairs when you're checking out, so you can get $5 off. So make sure you hold on to that. Speaking of registers, this desk where you checked in right here is not a register. So don't pull out your credit card just yet. You'll go downstairs and you can do that on your way out. And we do have many, many copies of Cindy's book at that desk, which you should definitely grab. And then please silence anything that rings, beeps, or vibrates, including you. And after the talk, we'll be doing a signing. So if you're interested in getting your book signed, I just ask that you line up along this sci-fi and fantasy aisle right here, and you can do some browsing while you wait to get your book signed. But thank you so much for being here, and let's get started. I'm going to have Cindy introduce yourself.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. So I know a lot of you, but I don't know all of you. So I am Cindy Goldrich. The reason that we're here is I wrote a book, so thank you all for coming. So we're going to have a very informal talk. What I mean by that is I'm going to say a few things. I'm going to introduce Kathy, who will say a few things. But really, we're happy to answer any questions you have. So just keep that in mind. If you have anything you've been wondering, this is a good time to ask. How many people here either have ADHD or have an immediate family member or close friend who has ADHD? Raise your hand, nice and big. Everyone look around. Lots of hands up, right? So I've been doing this for almost 20 years. 20 years ago, I would never have asked that question in public because there was so much shame, right? So much disbelief, so much trauma around, right? I used to get a phone call, I'm like, what? I can't hear you, right? Now I get a phone call, well, my kid has ADHD, right? So things are changing. Unfortunately, I do this around the world and it's not changing enough. And even within this country, there's still lots of communities. I had a phone call with a school today. They're like, well, in our community, we really don't talk about it that much. Anyone relate to that? Yeah. So, one more question. Does anyone want to guess what year ADD was first put in that Diagnostic Statistical Manual, the DSM, that big, thick book in the doctor's office? Raise your hand. Anyone want to take a guess?
1980.
Can you hear her? 1980. Anyone here go to school before 1980? So if you wonder why weren't we getting services? Why weren't we, right? It wasn't going on back then. So for generations, and forgive me, I wrote notes because there's so many things I really want to remember to say. For generations, many bright, gifted, creative kids, school was a nightmare. They were often labeled what? Lazy, unmotivated, difficult, challenging, all those things. But the reality is, their brain just simply worked differently. And I will say that many people, adulting is just as much of a nightmare as school was, right? So I got into this profession because I had that kid. And I never used to say that out loud, but I now have permission, so I get to say it out loud. My background as a counselor didn't prepare me. I went to teachers, they didn't know what they didn't know. Well-meaning, wonderful people, right? Just didn't know. So I started going to all the professional conferences there were, reading all the big manuals and meeting all the top people and the pioneers in the field. We didn't have that word influencer yet, right? And parent coaching didn't exist. So I became the person that I needed to guide me in parenting my amazing but complex kid. And as some of my friends here experienced last year, my son is pretty awesome. He's doing great, he's married, he's on a plane right now coming out here, he couldn't get here yet. He's successful, he's living his life. And I'm also proud to say, I'm gonna get a little teary-eyed because I didn't think she was gonna be sitting in the audience back there, but I'm also proud to say that my daughter became the special ed teacher that these kids need. So I'm a lucky mama. And so on behalf of all of those of you, or your family, or your friend, or your loved ones who have struggled, I thank you for being here. And also on behalf of all of you, we have work to do still. So those of you who know me know this book comes from the heart. My work is dedicated to parents fighting to have their children understood and to giving teachers the opportunity to learn how to support these kids so that they can feel seen and supported and valued. So at this point, I'm going to introduce someone. Before I introduce Kathy formally, I'm going to say how many people in here either have dyslexia or have someone in their world who has dyslexia. Lots of hands going up, right? So it turns out that a significant number of people with ADHD have dyslexia. You know how much? Roughly 30 to 50%. There's a huge overlap. We now understand these things that we didn't understand years ago. So in celebration of my book launch, I thought it would be really fitting to partner with Hillside School and Center for Dyslexia, a school that I wish existed 25 years ago when my son was young. So this is Kathy Sherman. Kathy has dedicated her career to understanding how children learn. She co-founded the Hillside School after decades of working directly with students and families with a vision of creating a place where children with dyslexia could be taught in ways that truly fit how they learn and feel seen in the process. So welcome, Kathy.
Thank you.
Thank you. So do you want to tell us a little bit about why you created Hillside and what brings you to all this work?
Well, it was interesting. I started in this field in the early 70s, and I say that, and then I think of how many decades that is, and I, not just the age thing, but the fact that things move so slowly, you know? I mean, it just is baffling. I had started another school in Boulder, Goldrich School. I don't know if any of you know that school way back when. But a parent came in and said to me, my daughter's dyslexic, why don't we have a school for kids who are dyslexic? And I said, why don't we have a school for kids who are dyslexic? I'm completely ready to do that. And the things I had done up to that just made me feel completely confident. I never thought it was a stressful thing. I didn't think it was an overwhelming thing. I just kept seeing kids who didn't get their needs met. And it went really quickly. We started in 2005, and now it's our 21st year, so it's going great.
And you now have a beautiful school.
Yes, we just moved into a new building, and it's really nice to be in a building that isn't like 60 years old.
Right.
But it's great. The energy is very different, and the kids are loving it. We're all loving it. It's great.
No, there's a lot of great energy there. I've been there. So yeah, I mean, ADHD, just to give you a little context, ADHD and dyslexia are different conditions, but they do overlap. Dyslexia affects how the brain processes written language. ADHD affects attention and impulse control and working memory and emotional regulation. Anyone relate to that emotional regulation issue with ADHD? Yeah, that's a big part. So when both are present, the challenges amplify each other. So what do you wish that most parents understood about dyslexia when their child first starts struggling?
I think when any child is struggling, the first thing I really encourage parents to do, and I get a lot of phone calls, and we do open our door at Hillside for any parent in the community to call and talk. It doesn't have to be that you are enrolling in Hillside, but something's going on and you don't know what it is and you don't know who to ask. So we do offer that to the whole community. I think when you see something going on and you don't know what it is, you have to take the time to look under the surface to determine what it is. Because it's very easy to think your child is just not motivated. You get a lot of those labels in other places. That they just don't want to. They just aren't working hard enough. No. Our job as adults is always, and actually even with our loved ones that are adults, when something is amiss, we have to take the time and investigate what it is. And then when we do that, we can come up with a plan and work with it. But I have situations where people call or the teachers saying they're hiding under the desk. They won't come out of the desk, and I don't know why they're doing that. Or they're running out of the school building, that's happened too. Or they just sit there staring off into space. They must have ADHD. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they can't engage with the educational task in front of them. So again, we have to sit down and methodically figure out what's going on. And you're not necessarily going to know that as a parent, but you can reach out to people in the community. There are organizations, BV Kid is one, that is a group of parents that supports other parents with kids who have dyslexia, but other things too. It's a great organization. So I think the main thing is we really have to look underneath the surface and see what it is that's driving the behavior that's on the exterior.
Yeah. And I have to say, I mean, I thought we'd be obsolete by now. I thought, I mean, not that for you, the school, absolutely that makes sense. We need, we're always gonna have kids with dyslexia and we need to teach them, but that concept of having to do that first line of like, the kid's not lazy, don't worry. You know what I mean? Or it's not your fault, it's not because you didn't read to them enough, and it's not because you didn't try all these things. It's just, this is a different brain type.
Yeah, the other thing I'll add is, reading is the first public developmental event for all humans. And other developmental stages are done within the home. Reading is, kids are excited, they're going to school, they're going to learn to read, and they're working hard, and it's not happening. And there will be an internal response to that. You may not see it for a couple of years, but there is something, they feel it, they know it, and they don't understand it. So it can impact them pretty significantly right away, even if they're not showing that impact. Never believe any other adult who says, don't worry, he's a boy, he's just, boys learn to read later. That's not necessarily true. I still hear that, oh, don't, it'll come. And in the meantime, that emotional toll is large and growing. So I say in kindergarten, if you have a child who is not, you have a bright verbal child who's not learning letters and letter sounds, you get it checked out.
Absolutely.
So the earlier the better.
Absolutely, and thank you for bringing up that part. I do, and I know, look, I'm aware that many of you are here to support me and to support this book and everything else, and maybe this isn't the issue you're dealing with, but I'm sure you know many other people who are, but to the bigger picture of this is about believing the experience of the parent and believing the experience of the child. And that this is not, kids do well if they can, not if they want to. If you've got a bright kid who just isn't doing what you expect them to do, scratch a little under the surface, because so often these are highly intelligent people. IQ is not at all the issue. And something in your gut probably already knows that, right? So, when both are present, it compounds. I mean, imagine trying to decode words on a page when you also like, oh, look, a butterfly, right? It's very, very challenging for these kids. So, you touched on it a little bit, but what do you notice emotionally in kids before they land somewhere like Hillside? And what do you think shifts when they finally feel understood?
One of the first things that I experienced was how quickly things changed for kids. And I saw postural changes. And I thought, that can't be. I mean, but no, not all kids, but some kids actually stood straighter, head facing that way instead of down. And it was shocking. And I continue to see that. But the changes, and we have a 3-week summer program, and one of the things I tell parents is, they're not going to gain a year's growth in 3 weeks, but we're going to shift that perception, that self-perception of what they are able to do, and they will leave feeling like, I can learn, I am able. So I think it actually happens very quickly. A lot of our parents say the evenings at home are so much better. A lot of kids will carry stress internally, and they'll go home and release it because it's a safe place at home to release it. And a lot of times it's like, what's going on from the parent's perspective? And it's because they're holding it in all day. They're the good kid, they're trying really hard. So the changes we see, actually, it doesn't take much success to start kids shifting into that place of feeling like they can do it and that they are able to.
Yeah, which is, there's nothing bigger than that, than having a kid actually say, I can read this. It's a huge, huge step. Many of the same brains that struggle with decoding and sustaining attention are really the big picture thinkers, right? They're the creative people, they're the out-of-the-box thinkers, the spatial thinkers. So many highly successful people now identify and say, yeah, that was me. Richard Branson talks about having ADHD. Steven Spielberg. I remember I was at a conference years ago, and I'm forgetting his name now, Damon John from Shark Tank. He and his mother were receiving an award for advocacy in the world of dyslexia and ADHD because she was she was mama bear. She was going to figure out how to help her kid read, right? And I think we can all call him successful at this point, right? So highly successful, highly motivated people who are just, we're losing so many of these brilliant people because we're not funding the schools and we're not funding the research, and I won't go into the whole political thing, but I'll just say that. But anyway, so one more question. We are going to open it up to Q&A. What's one message that you want parents to walk away with, or grandparents in this room? Because many of these people are the grandparents of these kids.
I think I already said it. I was going to save it for the end, but I let it out right at the beginning, and that is when you see something isn't going smoothly, something's amiss, and it could be the attention piece, it could be the reading piece, it could be the math piece, it could be the writing piece. Don't let it linger and hope it's just going to fix itself. Take a look, contact people that can help you. Maybe it's another parent who's been down that road, but keep asking. There are people out there that will support you, and find out what it is as early as you begin to see it, so that you don't have that emotional toll that you have to then work with. You have a whole other thing when that self-esteem is really suffering. So.
Yeah, and I know that there are people probably sitting in this room today who are saying, boy, do I wish I had that service. Boy, do I wish my parents understood, right? Boy, do I wish I understood about my own child, because I know the pain that some of my colleagues, my friends have gone through, right? So my message is, let's make it easier, right? Let's believe kids. As I said before, kids do well if they can, and by the way, so do grown-ups. So parents and grandparents, give yourself some grace. learn what you need. You don't have to do this alone. You deserve support as much as the kids do. So that's what we're here to do, to give resources to parents. I am gonna put a little plug, not because I wanna sell the book, but I do just wanna say, I think my daughter left, because she does have her little one, but this is the book that my daughter and I wrote, which is now also 10 years old, which is about ADHD in the classroom. I can't tell you how many teachers want to be trained. It's not that they don't care. I have a training program and teachers can't afford to pay for it. Schools say they can't afford to pay for it and they all want it. We need to have something shift because we're gonna lose another whole generation. And when we lose that generation, we're having people who are undiagnosed, untreated. The jails have a disproportionate number of people with ADHD, right? That's a real thing. But also, by the way, if this was a room full of entrepreneurs, we also would have a disproportionate number of people with ADHD because it is a different brain type. These are very often people who are, or I hate this expression, but gifted and talented or twice exceptional, right? So I leave you with that. I also want to say I realize there's a lot going on in the world, especially this week, and a lot in our personal lives. But for the sake of the current and future kids, we have to be vigilant in funding quality teacher training, quality programs, quality schools. So in that spirit, if anyone wants to support the school in a tangible way, if you want to purchase a book and you don't need it, you want to purchase it for the school, I'm sure you have parents who would benefit as well. So feel free to buy a book and donate it, either of the books, okay? So at this point, I really do want to just be here to answer any questions on any of these topics, if anyone has. Yes?
I'd like to understand what's the best way, from your perspective, to have a child officially be diagnosed as having ADHD. If you're concerned about your child, what steps should you take to get an official diagnosis? Yes, it's this, no, it's that.
That is a great question. You all heard her, I assume?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So here's why a diagnosis is important. Because can't we just go to Dr. Google at this point? Can't we just or ChatGPT, right? You can't. A proper diagnosis involves observation in 2 or more settings because kids are going to show up differently in school and at home. They're going to show up differently in math than they will in English and all these other places, right? We need to rule things out like sleep apnea and severe food allergies. By the way, if you put your kid on a gluten-free diet, that will help if they have a gluten allergy. If they don't, it's not helping, right? So we need to rule things out and rule things in. So to your point, it is important to get a proper diagnosis. Who can do a proper diagnosis? It could be a neuropsych, pediatrician, a nurse practitioner, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, I named a bunch of other professions. So how do you know who to go to? You go to someone who is expert in the field, who is doing this all the time. This is not a diagnosis. When you go to the pediatrician, these are 2 stories, and you describe your child, and they say, sounds like it may be ADHD. Here's a script for Ritalin. If it works, then we know it is. That's a hypothesis. That's not a diagnosis. So to me, the gold standard, especially if a kid is still in grade school, is a neuropsych exam, because then you're getting the full range, and if you have something you want to add to this, of course, but then you're getting the full range view, right? If it is someone older, by the way, there are many adults being diagnosed today, and I know after this talk, a lot of you are going to call me up because that always happens. Do I know anyone who died? Yes. Adults are being diagnosed all the time because when they were younger, especially the women were being diagnosed with anxiety and depression. But in reality, while that may be true, what was really true was they had undiagnosed, untreated ADHD. So even adults can be diagnosed with ADHD. So proper diagnosis is going to someone who does this all the time. Yes, I think between the 2 of us, we probably have a bunch of resources of who can actually do the diagnostic work, right? But it is a very valuable process, and it's not just a quick checklist. It's observing in 2 or more settings, it's ruling out things that may make it look like it's ADHD and it's not. It is some of those check-off forms, because those are still helpful, right?
Yeah, I just wanna say, I spoke to a parent this week, this was a learning issue. She said, well, I don't wanna get any testing done, it's a 14-year-old girl, because I just don't want that label. And then as we spoke and continued to speak, she began sobbing on the phone. So this is just a random call, just part of my days. And she began sobbing, and she said, well, she's now calling herself dumb. I said, that's the label. She will get a label that it will have a negative impact. When kids, adults have a proper diagnosis, it's usually a relief. There's this thing that's giving me a hard time, that's interfering. It's not a personal, somehow they can depersonalize when they get that, a proper label. I see many kids ease into what they need to do about it once they get that label. Like, okay, now we have a plan. So it's really important.
Yeah, thanks for bringing up that idea of label. I will say that you're 100% right. Kids are gonna give themselves a label anyway. There's a few reasons we want them to have an actual diagnosis. It leads to proper treatment. It can lead to some reimbursement, right? But mostly we want to help them understand themselves and understand that they're not alone. There are resources, there are things to connect to that can really be helpful. So, and by the way, one of the other myths is I've had parents also say, well, I don't want to label my kid, right? I don't want this going on. If a kid has an IEP or a 504, just if you don't know what that is, that's special, if they're receiving special services in school, they've been identified, none of that will go on their college record. None of that's gonna go on their record that, when they're applying to colleges. They're not permanently getting labeled or anything like that. So don't be afraid to get the right service. Yes?
Cindy, what, if any, is the correlation between ADHD and autism?
Great question. Correlation between ADHD and autism. I would say, I think, I get my statistic, but roughly 2% overlap, maybe a little bit more. We now have a new term. There's lots of new terms. My publisher, when I was, this is actually the second edition of a book that came out over 10 years ago. And she said, when you write the second edition, you didn't put words in there like ADHD, which is ADHD. We now, because there is an overlap, right? I didn't have things in there like neurodiversity. Why not? That wasn't a term yet. Anyone know what the term masking means? A lot of us know what masking means. Masking is what we've always done. It's where, I'm just gonna show up and look like I can do it because I don't want anyone to know that I can't, I have no idea what's going on, so I'm gonna put a mask on, right? These are the things that everyone does all the time. These are these new terms for old concepts. So in terms of the overlap, there's a definite overlap, but they are still distinct, right? But that's, again, where a good diagnostic workup is important. Not because we care about the label, but because we want the people to get the right resources. Yeah.
What does the treatment look like?
So treatment for ADHD is what we're doing now, which is education. I mean, I have a workshop, not to plug it, but I might as well plug it. I have a parent workshop series called Calm and Connected. It's a 7-session workshop series. I spend the first session, which is 2 hours, explaining the social and emotional impact that ADHD and executive function challenges have on learning and motivation, behavior, and the family system. So the first line of treatment is get the parent educated. So that the parent isn't saying to the kid, I want to just sit longer, just try harder, you can do this, you're so smart. That's not helping. So that's part of treatment. Another part of treatment, when appropriate for the older child, usually high school, college, can be direct coaching for that person. Medication, just to tell you, we know, anyone want to guess what year was Ritalin? What year did we start using Ritalin for what we now call ADHD? Anyone have a guess?
1998.
I'm hearing lots of things. Guess what? 1937.
Oh,
wow.
It has been around longer than most of the things you guys are taking today for things that you have now. okay? We know what the impact is on children, on grandchildren, on great-grandchildren. You get the idea? We know it's safe. I know there's a lot of information out there. That doesn't mean every kid has to be on meds. Meds are a tool in the toolbox, but pills don't teach skills. Who teaches skills? Parents, educators, life, right? So those are some of the main tools. And then having supportive people around you, having the resources around you, but it is a whole, it takes a village. Having a school you can go to where they really are understanding. I mean, I've taught in schools all across the country. I've taught at the most exclusive, top-end school, and I've spoken at schools where, anything but. Same questions are asked. Teachers, by the way, teachers are not trained in ADHD. It is not part of their school training, even today, right? So look at what we're doing. Because who do you think the kids are going to get the support? I mean, who the parents are going to? They're going to the teachers. So, yeah.
Cindy, what about correlation between?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
What about a correlation between ADHD and Asperger's?
So, again, terminology. You may not have gotten the memo. I say this in jest. Asperger's doesn't exist anymore. According to the latest DSM, right? It's all autism. It is a spectrum disorder. So the answer would be the same. But here's what I always say. If I say the word spectrum, what do we mostly think of? Autism. Let's put that word on the side. I think we're all on a spectrum. We all have strengths and weaknesses and challenges and everything else. Our brain, it's not like, oops, you flipped over, now you have ADHD. You know what I mean? These are all, and none of these things walk alone. ADHD, autism, learning challenge, all of it. Do you want, I don't know if you want to answer.
This is probably different from the question. I'm going back because it's stuck in my mind, is the teacher training is just critical, because teachers are still not trained to recognize reading challenges and dyslexia, yet 1 in 5 children in their class will have dyslexia, so they'll always have students with dyslexia. And that's still, I can tell you, I have a master's in this field. I didn't learn anything about dyslexia. I didn't learn what strategies for reading are effective. I had to do that all on my own. So teacher training is really the place we need to start with all of these things.
I'm trying. I've got the programs. It's just getting people to commit to them. Yeah. Yes, Steve.
Is there any scientific data about what the biochemical or neuroanatomical pathology might be that can cause?
So we can see ADHD in the brain. I never suggest spending thousands of dollars to get a brain scan because it's not going to tell you anything that good diagnostic workup won't tell us. But if you look at the brain scan of people with and without ADHD, you'll see things lining up differently. So think of it this way, ADHD in a nutshell is below normal transmission of the neurotransmitters dopamine, norepinephrine in the brain's prefrontal cortex, that's the front part of the brain. So what's happening is the brain isn't lighting up. It would be like, I'm gonna say to all of you, hey guys, you know what? I'm gonna wake you all up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Let's all get dressed really fancy and fold our laundry. Anyone's brain lighting up right now? But that's the same thing for these kids all day long, and adults. I know many of you are relating to what I'm saying. It's not that you don't know you should do your taxes, or know you should do this, or know you should do this. And it's not that you're lazy. It's just your brain's just not lining up. I don't have ADHD. I can work on the should. I should get this done. Okay, fine. I won't go do that. I'm gonna do this, right? The brain just doesn't work that way. Mark, back there, and then you, Carl. Yeah, but real loud because I'm having trouble
From an
hearing.
engineering point of view, it's quite a good concept. If you had 10 kids who you can get a good diagnosis early, to take the other point, which is get it early before the other threat, what's the range of outcomes? I'm not saying cure, but in terms of adaptation, dealing with it? I mean, what are the potential outcomes you can achieve by
Right.
early
What's
diagnosis?
the outcome?
and
That's a great
considered
question.
treatment?
Well, let's start with what population has it. According to the latest statistics, about 11% of school-age children have ADHD. Which, talk about teacher training, that means in every classroom you've got at least one kid with ADHD, right? So treatment outcome, this doesn't go away. This is something that is, it's part of who you are. So it's not necessarily that we treat it and it goes away, it's that you learn how to manage your life. You learn how to have the supports around you. You may have a supportive, spouse. You may have a job where, what's his name? David Nealman, who started JetBlue. He said that, and by the way, do you think it's a coincidence? David Nealman has ADHD. Do you think it's a coincidence that he's the one that put the TV on the back of the screen, the first airline? And he was the first person that came up with the ticketless, boarding pass, because he was solving for his issues, right? But he will tell you that he would not have been able to create JetBlue if he didn't offload so many of the things that he knew he just couldn't do. So that's what happens. We learn how to manage. And that's why we have coaches who specialize in working with adults. High-level executives have ADHD coaches to help them manage their lives. No different than anyone else. Yes, and then Carl. I'm sorry, I skipped you. Go ahead.
No, you can do Carl first.
Oh, you're so nice. Carl.
So there's been a lot of discussion about our educational system in general, how the one-size-fits-all kind of classroom hasn't worked and doesn't. There's been a lot of places now that are talking about individual programs, right? Khan Academy or whatever, and now they're building AI into it. And I'm just curious, will that, maybe it's a question for you on the hillside, have you looked into that and having a specialized individual program, is that kind of a way to get them feeling better, doing more, accomplishing more in the schools?
We are looking into that. I mean, I think AI is, it was out there and now it's here. And the potential, we're just not sure of how to integrate that into our curriculum. Part of what we do is we're looking for mastery and fluency of skills, and that takes direct interaction, that teacher reading what's going on with the child's behavior and knowing when to ask the right questions. So it's definitely going to be something I think that is incorporated. We just aren't sure exactly how, and we don't want to jump into something that we don't have good evidence that it's going to be effective, because our kids have been through that already.
Yeah, I'll give you my answer. The most important thing is connection. That true, warm connection. When people don't feel safe in any environment, they're not going to allow themselves to be vulnerable. They're not going to be able to learn. So we may add in a lot of stuff. I mean, I, for years, have been fighting schools to say, maybe you don't need every kid on an iPad or whatever. Like, maybe we need to, not have all these other interventions. So, yes, going slowly, there's going to be a lot of really good stuff, but we still want kids to be able to, learn, innovate, and all of those things. It's going to be interesting. Serena?
Yes. As a parent volunteering for many, many years in my kids' schools, I noticed that there were boys who were very active and hyper and had that ADHD
Right.
aspect. But a lot of girls had the kind of stare off in the distance, more of an ADD. Is that a thing anymore? Has
Yes.
ADD gone away?
So, remember I said since 1980 we had ADD? In 1987 they got rid of ADD. Now it's all ADHD. Makes sense. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. We know some of the kids aren't hyperactive. What do we call them? Inattentive type. That makes sense, right? And I don't really think of this as a disorder. I think of it as a difference with challenges, right? Not to say we don't have to pay attention to those challenges. But so the bigger answer to your question is we used to think this was mostly boys and a few girls. We now know that girls just show up differently. And very often they're the ones that are quiet and twirling their hair, right? And doing a lot more masking, right? So the current research is saying it's actually a lot closer, it's just showing up really differently. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, like, with so much research around screens and screen time and the brain, I'm just wondering the connection that you see, like, is it worse with kids with ADHD?
I think that the screens are making it hard for everybody, and especially those kids. But I will say the same thing. I think that diet matters, right? What you eat for all of us. If you don't eat well, you're gonna be sluggish and everything else. But a kid with ADHD who's already prone to being dysregulated, them not eating well is gonna matter even more. So the issue really becomes one of parenting, no different than anything else. My parent coaches work with parents around screen time all the time because it's about, how do we deal with that addiction? How do we set the boundaries and everything else? Is it changing our brains? It's possible. I don't, it's still a little early to know, but if you are a parent and you are anxious about all of this, there's a book called The Anxious Generation. I'm pretty confident they have it downstairs. It's a really important book to read if you've got kids that were born in the 90s. I'm just gonna say the 90s. Anyone here have kids born in the 90s? Yeah.
So two things. One, in terms of teacher training, there is teacher training in BDSD. I know because I've done it.
Yep.
Or led it, I should say.
For ADHD and executive function challenges?
Neurodiversity generally, but also kind of from that also different sub-elements of that. And so I say that mostly because it's important for parents to engage with the teachers, knowing what the teachers are getting access to.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because it only goes so far if the teachers are getting access to it, but if that only ends kind of like with what they're learning, but if there's no continued conversation, it doesn't benefit the kids as much. So,
Right.
Engage with the teachers.
Absolutely.
Because they are learning about it to some extent.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to kind of touch on, or see if you can expand upon, is you refer to, I guess, ADHD or I guess these identities generally as differences with challenges.
Right.
And I think what I'd be curious to hear more about is, from my perspective, the challenges don't come from the differences necessarily. The challenges come from how the world is structured to cater or not to cater to those differences, right? So in other words, like, we have created schooling that is structured for a certain type of way of learning,
Mm-hmm.
at least traditionally. And those that do not fit that, have the challenges, right? Because they are being excluded in some respect. Because we're all different.
Yeah.
It's the differences, those with the challenges are the ones with the differences that aren't giving access to the resources they need. So I guess I'm curious to hear your perspective on how that shakes out, especially when you refer to neurodiversity, for example.
Right,
That's
right.
kind of how it's all.
Yeah, that's our new label for it. So I would say this, in the best of schools, okay, where the teachers are trained and we've created a classroom where, the majority of kids really can learn, we still have to understand the impact of something like ADHD, and I'll give you a very specific example. Executive function. I'm not gonna go into a whole lecture on executive function. I'm sure some of you know what I mean when I say that. Executive function is the front part of the brain that helps you do what you intend to do. One of the executive functions is processing speed. That's the speed that you can hear information and relay it to the brain, see information and, be able to process what you're seeing, right? And respond with reasonable accuracy. That's a developmental skill, but it's also an executive function skill that people are varied in. You could have the highest IQ in the grade and the weakest processing speed, so it's got nothing to do with intelligence. So if you have a weaker processing speed, and I'm talking at this rate, and you're not able to take notes down, and you're sitting in there and going, and I'm sure some of this is happening to some of you, like, whoa, could she just slow down a little bit? I can't process it that quickly, right? That's going to impact. So by the teachers really understanding and knowing the profile of the different kids, and the kid being able to advocate for themselves without shame and saying, you know, I need to, right? Because there is no association between speed and intelligence. Anyone remember with trauma those math drills you had to do back in school? You know, like the math tables, like what's 3 times 5, what's 4 times 7, right? And I do really fast. Well, guess what that was doing to some of the brightest kids in the class? Stressing them out so they couldn't perform. Does that make sense? So that's why it's a combination of creating a school, but also understanding the child's and the challenges. I don't know if that really answered, but I hope it answered some of it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about the executive functioning as well. Is it, I mean, is it a continuum with ADHD? Is it a contrast?
It's a great
Is it its
question.
own thing? Because that's something that's touched us.
Yeah, so again, 20 years ago, well, I will tell you, the first national conference I went to where they talked about executive function was 2008. Okay, that was the professional conference. And the keynote talk that went on for 2.5 hours was partly, should we be calling this executive function, executive functioning, or executive functions? Like that's, right? Like it was all kind of new. And so we used to think of ADHD as separate from executive function. Executive function, by the way, just so you can have a basic understanding, as I said, it's the front part of the brain. The brain develops from the back of the brain to the front of the brain. Okay, so front of the brain is where your executive function system is. That's the last part of the brain to develop. Okay, so what we now understand is executive function has to do with planning, organizing, you know, initiating, emotional regulation, time management, all of those doing things, right? What we now understand is that by definition, if you have ADHD, you are going to have deficits in executive function. If you have deficits in executive function, that doesn't mean you have ADHD. There could be other reasons. But we know that this all walks together. By the way, I'll say one other thing. This is off topic, but I know some of you are going to be like, so anyone ever hear of oppositional defiant disorder? And I'm looking at some of the faces like, yeah, where is she going with this? We now understand that the potential to develop ODD, oppositional defiant disorder, is about 40% when you've got ADHD. Why? Because it's inherent in the emotional dysregulation that's part of ADHD. It's not because your parents weren't good parents, not because they were too lax or anything else, but all the more reason we've got to help parents understand what this is all about, because they're unintentionally creating situations where their kids are getting activated. Does that make sense?
I just have to say something, because I hate that term, oppositional defiant disorder.
It should be.
And I consider it a harmful label on kids, because it's like, well, they have that, so, I mean, that's what they have. No, it's what's driving that, what's causing that behavior. It's something else. It may be executive function, it may be whatever, but
It's the inherent emotional dysregulation.
I think it's a damaging label, and
Yep.
that's how I feel about it.
No, but it is. It absolutely is, because all it does is it blames the parent.
It's shaming.
It shames
It's shaming.
the child,
Yeah.
and it doesn't help anything.
Yep.
What helps is helping the parent understand and all of that, right? Yeah.
So can you speak a little bit about the book specifically and what would parents?
Oh, is that why we're here?
What would people expect to find in the book? Can you give kind of like an overview of the book?
Sure, thank you. So, I got an email one day about 15 years ago from, I got emails from anyone that has any kind of business. You know you're gonna get marketing emails all the time, and it's spam, most of them you just get rid of. But I got an email one day, and it was from Norton Publishers, and they said, hey, would you like to write a book based on your workshop? I'm like, sure, like, why not? So remember I mentioned my Common Connect workshop series? That's 7 sessions. In that workshop, I literally help parents build a new house. The foundation is calm, the center is that loving, warm connection, and then the sides are communication, like how we talk, so our kids will listen. This is actually the name of the book, many of you may know. And talk so your kids will listen, listen so your kids will talk. It's older. But anyway, how to really communicate, but most importantly, how to collaborate. So we're not doing this top-down parenting approach. We're actually engaging our kids and working with them, because that's going to diffuse a lot of the defiant behavior, because they take ownership, right? And then we have to worry about clarity and consistency, and at the end, we worry about consequences. And I promise you, that's like the least part of what we need to do, because we've really solved a lot of systemic things. So the book really is 8 keys. It's really, each chapter is a part of the house. How to build back connection and calm and relationship and all of that. So, and the first chapter is a deep dive into what is ADHD, what are executive function challenges, and how these all impacting learning and motivation and behavior, and the family system, because believe me, it's impacting the siblings too, right? It's impacting everybody. So, thank you. Yes?
I've heard a lot about connections between ADHD and depression. Can you
Yes.
talk about that?
Sure. So ADHD and depression, about 18% of people with ADHD do deal with depression. Now, is this clinical depression, or is it depression because they feel like a square peg in a round hole? Not always easy to tease out, but it is absolutely a real thing. And sister to that, I'm going to say, is anxiety. And anxiety, about 40 to 50% of people with ADHD deal with anxiety. I think anxiety is always in the room with these kids. I think a lot of what we as parents see as behavior is really them just pushing off the world and saying, I can't handle you right now. I can't handle all this right now. Because they're so overwhelmed. Their brain is just not working in the way, it's like the traffic cop is asleep and the messages aren't getting to where they get to. So that's a big overlap too.
I want to make a comment
It
about.
looks like we have 5 minutes, so let's
Right.
just,
I'm gonna take the whole 5 minutes.
go for it.
I would say 95% of the families that come to Hillside will tell me, oh, and my son or my daughter also has an anxiety disorder. And my response is, maybe, maybe not.
Right.
Once they get into an environment they can manage, let's see if that anxiety drops away. But the thing that is important to realize is if a child is anxious, they're in a stress response, and that interferes with the prefrontal cortex. So with ADHD, which they're already trying to get that fired up and working properly,
Yep.
then the anxiety totally makes that much harder. And so I think all of us know when we've been, maybe you're having to do math in public or something, or whatever it is that might cause you anxiety, you can't think. You can't activate this part of your brain when the brain is busy in a stress response, and you can't see it. It's not like it's evident, it's on your skin doesn't turn a different color. And some kids are very quiet about that when they're having a response like that, but it is hugely impactful on learning and behavior both.
On all of it. One more question, then we'll
It's
wrap
curious
up.
to know, in your book or in your practice, we know that a lot of these learning disabilities are hereditary, right?
Yes.
And I find it really interesting. I am ADHD or raising an ADHD, possibly dyslexic child. I find it really interesting when I'm talking to other moms, because I'm a really big advocate, I'm really informed. I interviewed every single school in Wolf informed. I find it really interesting when I'm talking to people and they go, oh, when I say, oh, so your kid has ADHD,
What about you?
which parent does that come from? And most of the time people are like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And then later they call me later and they're like, I think that I have ADHD.
That's right.
So I'd be curious to hear you talk more about
Yeah.
that.
Probably 40 to 50% have at least one parent who has ADHD, so those of you who are in the room, you might be thinking, oh, is that where that all came from? It's highly hereditary. And I will tell you, how many of you have more than one child, regardless of whether they're diagnosed or not? Okay, are your kids the same as each other?
No.
Absolutely not, right? So add that into the mix too. But yeah, because by the way, if you've met one person with ADHD, you've met one person with ADHD, it shows up differently in everybody, right? So yeah. So I'm gonna stick around and sign some books. I'm just warning everyone, talk about anxiety. I could speak to you guys all day. Signing, you're gonna see my handwriting, you're gonna understand I'm a leftist, it's a mess. So anyway, but I'm happy to answer any other questions. I do have some of my cards back there and up here. All kidding aside, and I mean this, if you have questions, you really can call me because I know what it's like to have been there. So it's okay, all right? Thank you all for being here.